Thank you very much. So just a formal notice before we dive in. The information provided in this presentation is confidential and proprietary to BlackBerry Cylance. It may not be disclosed without the permission of BlackBerry Cylance. So I appreciate you all for giving the time for joining us today for this webinar. I will be discussing the attack simulation services and diving into a light war story. So here at BlackBerry Cylance, I am responsible for setting the strategic direction for the attack simulation services. I am a certified CREST simulated attack specialist and a simulated attack manager and hold a PhD in computer system security. Outside of this profession, I find the time to ride motorcycles, enjoy cigars, and play the piano. So the agenda today is we'll be talking about the mission of the BlackBerry Cylance Attack Simulation Service Team, why we offer both breach simulation and adversary simulation engagements, the business challenges we address, the BlackBerry Cylance approach, a typical engagement scenario, how to assess a prospective red team service provider, and a war story from the field, and then we'll close off with an open Q&A. So what are some of the challenges out there today facing organizations? How resilient is your organization against cyber attacks? To what degree are you resilient? Are you susceptible to opportunist attacks? What about highly targeted attacks from a persistent adversary? What effect would a comprehensive breach have on your organization, customers, and the public? And what would be the intent behind such an attack? How do you train effectively against adversaries and their tactics, techniques, and procedures? I'm sure most would want to have the opportunity to rehearse through the defense procedures before having to fend off an actual malicious attack. So we have launched the Attack Simulation Service Line. This is a consulting service that addresses those previously discussed challenges facing organizations. The offerings provide an opportunity for organizations to be subjected to a simulated attack. This provides a forum for exercising your defensive capabilities under realistic conditions, and also determines where gaps lay across your prevention, detection, and response. This may include your people, processes, and technology. So currently, we have two attack simulation service offerings. The breach simulation service is for organizations that want to validate their security assumptions, exercise their defense, identify gaps in their security capabilities, and strengthen their overall security posture. Adversary simulation services are driven by threat intel, and this is the right fit for organizations that want to exercise and test their defenses against attacks carried out by threat actor groups that actively target their industry or specifically their organization. Breach simulation engagements take a holistic approach. It allows security capability insights to be obtained across the organization, including people, technology, and processes. The engagements follow an end-to-end attack lifecycle, going through each stage of the cyber attack kill chain. It provides experience for defensive teams against unspecified threats, allowing them to run through their playbooks, become more confident, and refine their processes. It allows for an improved security posture and an understanding of the overall effectiveness of defenses and mitigating controls. So the breach simulation engagements come in 4 tiers. This allows value to be derived for any organization, no matter their current security posture or budget. As you move through the tiers, the attacks become more targeted, more strategic, and more persistent. Each engagement is driven by a set of attack objectives, and each tier affords for an increasingly involved attack objective. Adversary simulation engagements provide authenticity, an authentic attack simulation based on real-world threats facing a specific industry or organization. It tests susceptibility to a cyber attack from adversaries who pose a threat. Defensive teams can train and rehearse against those specific threats and understand overall effectiveness of their current defenses against those real threats, and all of the business impacts allow their company to understand those threats when realized. Each adversary simulation engagement is driven by threat intelligence. There's a choice between emulating a type of actor, such as commodity, advance, or apex, or should the intelligence highlights a specific group, such as APT13 or FIN10, these can be emulated. Should the intel suggest a specific risk profile, a scenario can be built based upon that profile, such as an insider attack, supply chain attack, or a malicious contractor. The engagements provide an authentic emulation. The attacker tools, tactics, techniques, and procedures are used along with the same attacker operational security, intent, and general operating procedures of that adversary. So to summarize further, a breach simulation will exercise your overall security capabilities across prevention, detection, and response through an end-to-end attack simulation and validate your security assumptions. The adversary simulation is a threat intelligence-led engagement that provides an authentic experience of being subjected to an attack by real-world threat actors who are targeting your industry or organization. Companies often make various assumptions when it comes to their security posture. Basing your security on assumptions is a recipe for disaster. Our engagements are designed to remove bias and subjectiveness and instead provide an objective, fact-based standpoint. Some organizations have put all of their faith in their technology stack, believing this alone can keep them secure, with no people or processes to drive it. Some organizations have made investments in people, either through an internal security operations center or a managed service security provider. However, they may not have had the opportunity to exercise their detection and response playbooks. Who knows if they will work under realistic attack conditions, and where are the opportunities for refinements? Some organizations have procured regular pen testing. This does a good job at identifying weaknesses within technology-based security controls. However, it does not examine the real-world attack surfaces and does not provide insights into detection or response capabilities. Significant gaps remain if security controls are not tuned to be effective against real-world attacker techniques, tactics, and procedures. So this table highlights some of the key differences between our attack simulation offerings and traditional pen tests. So penetration test is about a comprehensively listing technical vulnerabilities within a limited scope environment. They rely on efficiency and coverage. They do not test each aspect of an attack lifecycle. They rarely cover people and processes, only technology, and they only cover prevention. Attack simulations cover the full spectrum across people, processes, and technology, across prevention, detection, and response, and they cover the full attack lifecycle with a high emphasis on post-exploitation activities. On each engagement, the attack simulation team will be moving through the attack lifecycle as a means to achieve an attack objective. Attack objectives are based on the risk profile of the target organization and revolve around critical capabilities and prized assets. We have taken a 4-tier approach for scoping our engagements. As we advance through the tier offerings, our mission goals and tactics increase in complexity and business impacts. The attack simulation team will be attempting to complete the attack objectives. However, the completion of these objectives within the allotted time frame does not define the engagement success. The engagement's primary value is in providing a forum for an organization to exercise their security capabilities whilst identifying gaps in their overall security posture at each stage of an attack lifecycle. So tier 1 objectives. Objectives in this tier can be achieved immediately upon compromising an end user's workstation or obtaining their credentials. Tier 1 attack objectives don't require us to know anything about the client or their business processes. This might be to install malware on the system or access VIP mail accounts. These start with a technical compromised but are drawn back to a business impact. Tier 2, we begin targeting systems that support critical business functions. This often requires an attack that proceeds through a short sequence of technical hops or stages. Tier 2 attack objectives don't require us to know anything about the client or their business processes. This might be obtaining privileged access to an environment, which is a technical goal that is then used to derive various business impacts. With Tier 3, we focus on the actions on objective stage of an attack. Tier 3 objectives are tailored to the business context and require an understanding of that organization's standard operating procedures. This is where we go through the actual realization of an attack objective and demonstrate the business impact. With Tier 4, we focus on showing how one or more of the client's critical business functions can be compromised. This is our most customized engagement. And Tier 4 objectives require the working knowledge of the target industry practices and the organization's specific standard operating procedures. This is again where we go through the actual realization of an attack objective where possible. And this is where we start with a business impact and then work backwards towards a technical compromise. So we go through a typical breach simulation engagement scenario. So company Y is a multinational law firm. They have deployed endpoint protection, EDR tools, and various security appliances. They have implemented single sign-on and multi-factor authentication for identity and access management. They have regularly scheduled penetration tests to identify and address vulnerabilities, and they also have an internal security operations center. They are looking to put their security capabilities through the paces. They assume themselves to be secure due to these investments. They are concerned that an attacker may leverage a foothold in their environment to gain key insights and conduct insider trading. To evaluate a mature security environment like this one, an advanced tier engagement was conducted. The attack team was successful in achieving the attack objective, and now the client understood that processes need to be put into place to tie all of the security fabric together. The defensive teams have gained experience in responding to an attack and now been able to refine their playbooks. And a typical adversary simulation engagement scenario could be with Bank Y that provides corporate and commercial banking services for customers throughout Europe and the Middle East. The bank relies on SWIFT to manage financial transactions and secure interbank fund transfer. Board members became alarmed when the financial media reported that a threat actor group associated with North Korea had nearly succeeded in completing a fraudulent transfer of almost $1 billion from a compromised bank. The board instructed the CISO to assess the risk of that same attack overcoming Bank Y's existing defenses and seeing if their security team have the capability to fend off such an attack. In scenarios like this, an adversary simulation engagement that utilizes threat intel on that North Korea threat group using their TTPs and Tier 4 attack objectives was the appropriate choice. An engagement was conducted that leveraged those same TTPs as that North Korea threat group with the same attack objective of trying to transfer funds via the SWIFT network. The TTPs that we emulated were able to breach the bank's initial defenses, but were not able to complete the attack objective of transferring funds. The client understood that proactive threat hunting must occur and be aware of the gaps that need to be tightened. The defensive teams have now gained experience in responding to an attack that is likely to be conducted against them in the future. They have now been able to refine their playbooks and make them more contextual to the organization's risks and those threat actor TTPs that might be used against them. So our engagements are broken down into specific phases. Once commercial agreements have been made, we look to assemble the white cell team. This is a team within the client organization that is not part of their operational defensive team. They will be collaborating with the attack team to drive direction, progress, and ensuring alignment so that the full value of the exercise can be extracted. This concept is a key component in a successful attack simulation engagement. Next, a threat review workshop is conducted for adversary simulation engagements, whereby we discuss the current threat landscape and review the most immediate threats facing the organization and profile specific threat actors. We then go through a rules of engagement process to determine explicitly the baseline scope, approval process, and other items. This removes ambiguity and ensures it's not the wild, wild west and no assumptions are made. The white cell is involved at each stage of the attack lifecycle and throughout the engagement, so these rules of engagements act as the baseline and the white cell has the opportunity to get involved at each stage. We then move on to the actual execution of that engagement. So we move through the attack lifecycle, starting with reconnaissance, where we learn as much as we can about the target's technology, people, and processes. We then look to complete an initial compromise, whereby we identify and leverage a weakness that enables initial access. We then move to establish a foothold, which is to ensure reliable and persistent access to the environment. And then, if required, we will try to escalate privileges and compromise additional systems that move us closer to achieving the actions and objectives, which is completing the end mission. So this is a recursive timeline. We go back and forth to each stage, and we only do things that are necessary to move us closer to that final attack objective. So at the end of each engagement, a client will be provided a written report. This has sections dedicated to different audiences, including board members and technical staff. An outbrief presentation is conducted with all project stakeholders, and this deep dive effort affords the client an opportunity to discuss key points that affects them. It builds confidence and ensures a full value is extracted for each part of the business. So BlackBerry Cylance attack simulation teams are composed exclusively of principal level consultants that have completed successful engagements for organizations of all sizes and virtually every industry sector. Breach simulation engagements provide SOC teams with invaluable opportunities to exercise their playbooks and hone their protection, detection, and response skills without the real-world impact of an actual breach. Adversary simulation engagements allow clients to rehearse and refine their defenses against threats that they are likely to be subjected to. This leads to a significant reduction in cyber risk exposure. In addition to a technical analysis, our experts contextualize recommendations in terms of the impacts on the business. This helps win executive support for necessary security investments and provides guidance for these investments. BlackBerry Cylance also offers compromise assessments and instant response, which are trivially pivotal should that need arise. So there are plenty of service providers out there that suggest that they have a similar offering. How can you be sure that you procure the right one? You need to ask about credentials. Do they adhere to standards such as CREST? Ask for a sample report. Ask what the engagement process looks like, how they scope, and how they define rules of engagement. What tangible outputs do they have, and what do they look like? And how do they obtain their threat intel? How does the pen test offerings differ from the attack simulations? The answers to each of these will help you understand the maturity of the offering, and it's essential that you do not let cowboys run riot in your environment with these types of engagements. So now we can talk about a light story from the field. So we had in the past a client called Acme Bank. They were concerned about an attacker to see if they were concerned that an attacker would be able to cause them direct financial loss. An attack objective was set to transfer £10,000 to a nominated bank account through a breach simulation engagement. They wanted an opportunity for their organization to practice under realistic conditions against a determined attacker. They also wanted to gather insights to enable security spending discussions. So just to recap on For this engagement, we went through the full attack lifecycle. We started with a zero prior knowledge perspective and operated remotely. So the first stage in reconnaissance is we want to know as much as possible about that target organization, only within the business context. We want to learn as much as we can about the people, processes, and technology. So we went on LinkedIn, searched for the Acme Bank organization. Then we listed all of the people who had listed themselves as an employee of that organization. From this, we were able to identify their first name, last name, job title, location, and a large set of current skill sets. All of the data was organized and used for targeting purposes in later stages. It also gave an insight into the structure of the target company and the different departments that they have. How many people do they have working in their IT department? How many years experience do they have? Who are their key players? Does the listed skill set help determine any of the technologies that they may have? For example, we identified an employee of Acme Bank that listed Symantec endpoint administration as part of their roles. So we were confident that we might see this level of protection in the environment and could tailor our payloads appropriately. During this phase, the most used tool is the web browser persistence and the ability to manage data. Our team then began to look at the infrastructure. We used passive techniques to determine information about the infrastructure, avoiding sending traffic directly to the targets where possible. We identified a lot of web servers that hosted static content. We also identified a OWA instance and a Citrix login page. The Outlook Web Access instance did not appear to immediately prompt for multi-factor authentication, but this could also be requested at the second stage of authentication. But notably, the Citrix login page did ask for that multi-factor token. So we leveraged password spraying as an initial vector technique to discover valid login credentials for their externally exposed exchange services. We used the information obtained from LinkedIn to derive potentially valid email addresses and selected a password to use that was based on a predictable password. Each of the login attempts came from a different source IP as to make sure that the logs did not look too suspicious. We identified an account using a password of someone 2019. This allowed us to access OWA using these credentials and pull down sensitive emails. We are also able to pull down the global address list, which gives us a lot more targets that we could use later on if necessary. We also noted that the mailbox did not have SMIME in place, so none of the emails were encrypted and message signing was not enabled. So we started to do some targeted searches in relation to that mailbox. This included, do they have any access to any shared mailboxes? Does it hold any onboarding materials? Did it have any information regarding to remote connectivity, such as VPN or Citrix? And did it have any MFA-C tokens? And the answer to that last question was yes. They had RSA soft tokens attached to the onboarding material. So to leverage that multi-factor RSA-C token, we would also need the PIN number. We called up the target employee with the pretext of being from IT and needing to sync their token. As we didn't need their password, they were not suspicious and give us their PIN. Armed with the RSA soft token from the email, their PIN from the phone call, and the password from the spraying, we were able to authenticate Citrix. This provided us with a foothold within the target network environment. We now need to ascertain a couple of things relating to our context. Who have we compromised? Where are we in the network? What is around us? What can we access? And the answer to this was that we were running as a non-privileged domain user. We had connectivity to the entirety of the internal network, and we had access to various network file shares. We now conduct actions on objectives. This is the most involved aspect of the operation. We need to understand the standard operating procedures for this company, such as what is their process for transferring money. We obtain this insight from onboarding resources. We are essentially a new employee within this target organization. Therefore, we leverage all of the learning resources that they make available across SharePoint, emails, and wikis. We understood what business units were involved and what systems were involved in transferring funds. We learned that they utilize a mainframe application for transferring funds, and that there is a specific Active Directory user group that is used for identifying and managing these users. So in these engagements, we do not do things for the sake of it. We only do things that move us closer to the attack objective. And to achieve this attack objective, we would need to escalate our privileges. We looked through the accessible file shares and found a script that contained a hard-coded password. This password allowed local admin access to each workstation within the environment. We now needed to locate the systems that belonged to the users that were associated with transferring funds. We used user hunting techniques and the local admin password from that file share. We were able to compromise the systems and execute our implant to get our code execution on those users. Next, we needed to understand the operating procedures for these users on their daily activities. We logged keystrokes, application workflows, and times. Then once we were satisfied that we were understood their standard operating procedures for transferring funds, we were then able to connect to the mainframe from the compromised machines, follow the standard operating procedures, and send money to the nominated bank account. And this is where the mission was successful. And that concludes the presentation. I will now look to take some questions. So how does this offering differ from BAS? Let me mix it up. So I believe this question is relating to breach and attack simulation software, which refers to an automated software approach. So where does this fit in relation to this service? So these services are consultancy-led. They are led by humans, and the adversary simulation service is intelligence-driven. Automated BAS software can complement this by helping to close gaps in the technical controls, but it does not provide an authentic representation of that real-world threat. It does not bake out assumptions, and it does not have the contextual business insights. It's heavily technology-focused. So the BAS type of solutions will not be able to compromise this bank and transfer money via a mainframe or a Swift environment. It would only be able to do the actual technical hops under a kind of simulated basis. Okay, so is there potential for social engineering component during this engagement, and do you offer multilingual capabilities? Okay, so in terms of the attack lifecycle, when we look to do the initial compromise, there are multiple vectors that we try to ascertain which are the most viable at that stage. So with that, we would likely look at the attack surface, and we will determine, is there any vulnerability in the external facing infrastructure, such as a web application or a unpatched system, and then we might compromise it that way, or we might leverage phishing attacks via email or SMS, or we might, but if necessary and if it's appropriate, we will conduct social engineering to get that initial access. So we might conduct a phone call, or we might use a hardware-based attack or a physical close proximity entry attack as well. So depending on the threat intel that we have as well, if it's an adversary simulation engagement, whatever tech, if the real world threat actor group does use social engineering, we will use those same TTPs as well. And in terms of do we offer multilingual capabilities, that we do have in-house capabilities for working across multiple regions. I haven't got a full list, but Personally, I have worked across Japanese systems, Spanish, German, and we do have multiple people on our team that have multilingual skills. If there's a specific requirement, we can assess that on a per-need basis. Okay, I think we got, let's see. If someone is a new CISO, what is the use case? So if you are a new CISO, you might have a picture in your head of the current security posture of your organization. This might be painted by your initial bias and painted by existing teams. All of these are assumptions, and therefore one of these attack simulation exercises would be the perfect opportunity for an unbiased, fact-based, and holistic method for testing those assumptions, and will also give the company an opportunity to exercise overall defensive teams under that new leadership as well. Okay, so we have a question. Does any phase of the engagement involve having a team on-premise, or is it performed remotely only? So in 9 times out of 10, it would be remote only. The time whereby we would conduct on-site activities is in adversarial simulation engagements, whereby the tactics, techniques, and procedures used by that cracker group that we are emulating use those types of on-site activities. Of course, we can make a bespoke engagement, but the general rule is that cyber attacks are conducted via cyber means. But again, we do have the capability to do on-site elements if that is part of your risk concern. In real-world attacks, what we see 9 times out of 10, the threat actors would most often would use those cyber means before pivoting into those on-site elements. And of course, that isn't, if you wanted a kind of insider threat scenario or contractor scenario, we can tailor engagement under that bespoke scenario as well, if that fits in with your threat model and your risk profile. What are the typical options businesses opt to if it's determined their internal security resources, including people and technology, are not capable to handle new and advanced threats? Can BlackBerry Cylance take over and offer this as a service? And has this happened with real case scenarios? Okay, so a lot of the times the attack team is successful in reaching their attack objective, and we determine that the detection and response capabilities do need a lot of work. So depending on where those major gaps lay, we do have other services that can be used to help define a security roadmap, and we can help you get there. So we do have a strategic service team that can help you build that roadmap and point you in the right direction for implementing that roadmap as well. It has happened, it is a regular occurrence, and yeah, absolutely, we do offer the facilities to help you on all of your security journeys. Okay, so there doesn't appear to be any more questions. So next steps, you can visit us on Cylance.com, and we have a page dedicated to the services, the attack simulation services page. We will be sending out a solution brief, and if you have any questions, you can email me at paimany@cylance.com for direct contact, and I'll be more than happy to communicate with you and answer any queries that you have. Thank you again very much for your time, and hopefully speak with you all again soon.